Technical tests can be so scary when you don't know what to expect. If you want to learn a little bit more about what a technical test entails in the world of bioinformatics, stay tuned on this episode of Genomics with Georgia. Hi guys, welcome back. This is Genomics with Georgia. This is my space on the internet where I share with you guys everything I've learnt in joining the world of computational biology coming from a wet lab background. Today we're going to focus on something really important when you're trying to get that first position in this world of bioinformatics, and that is the scary, the terrifying technical test. But it's not going to be as scary as you once thought after you've watched today's video. So I've recently been applying for some jobs, woo! So I am well versed in the variety of technical tests that you can get. It's right in the front of my brain at the moment. So I'm going to share with you guys some examples of the kind of formats that you can get and some top tips at the end of this video to make sure that you maximize your chance of passing that technical test. Let's get into it. So first things first, if you're applying for any kind of role in the world of bioinformatics or data science, chances are they're going to ask you to do a technical test. Whether this is an entry-level role, a senior role, or a really high principal level role, you're going to have to demonstrate that you have the technical skills for that position. But the confusing thing is, technical tests can vary so much. So let's talk about some of the kind of formats you can expect to be given in this scenario. There can be many different formats that these tests come in. So let's go through some of the examples I've come into in my job hunting journey. One example is you can have a technical test that you have to do during the interview process. And if this is online, it can either be one of two ways. You can either do it whilst being watched by the interviewer, so they can see your screen while you're doing it, which is hella scary and that's stressful and they shouldn't do that. Or you can have the alternative way where they give you a certain amount of time to do the technical test and then you log back in and then show your results or hand in your results to the company. This can either be something from half an hour I've seen, or it could be an hour or even 2 hours, but they give you that time to go away independently, complete the technical test, and then give it back at the end. So this is what happens if you have to do the test within the interview. So that's one way. Another second format of a technical test is they give you the test to take away with you and then you hand it back in after an allotted amount of time, but not during your interview process. So there's less of a time pressure on it, which is really good for getting the best out of people. And this allotted time, it can either be maybe over a weekend, so they give you the test on Friday and you'd have to return it in on Monday. I've seen it where you get given a week, so they give you a test on, day X, and then 7 days later you have to hand it back in to the employer. Or you can have a third option, which I found with one company where they gave me 2 weeks to go and complete the technical test. But as you can imagine, the test was a little bit more extensive. There were lots more questions and it started from very basic syntax to kind of how would you approach a problem that we would face in in the job that you're applying for. So very varied kind of ways that you can get given this test. But yeah, it breaks down to two kind of ways. Cat hair. Either doing it within the interview or having it to take away at home. I've kind of talked about virtual ways to do the technical test, but now we're moving into 2023 and we're in person a lot more now, right? So actually, I've had a few technical tests in person, in an in-person interview, which was, the first one was slightly terrifying, but let's talk through what that would mean if you have to do a technical test in person. I had two examples that I went through. So you could have a case where they actually asked you to pseudo code on a whiteboard how you would solve a challenge. It sounds kind of scary, but when we say pseudo code, it's more what are the steps that you take to solve the problem. So the syntax doesn't have to be perfect. You're not at a machine. It's more difficult to get that correct. And we don't know loads of perfect syntax off by heart. Like, who has the time to do that? There's a reason why we have tab autocomplete. So you can have instances where you code in real life on a whiteboard in front of the interviewers, which, yeah, kind of terrifying, but actually once you get into the gist of it, can be kind of fun. And then the second option is to have a multiple choice questionnaire kind of type scenario. So they could give you examples of coding syntax and you'd have to say which one is right and which one is wrong, and then talk through your reasoning behind knowing what syntax is right and what syntax is wrong. So these are the kind of, coding tests I've been introduced to. There's also something called paired programming, but I haven't actually done much of this myself, so I'd suggest to have a look at that if it is directed that it's in your interview. But that's kind of the gist of the format of the technical test. But what's actually in the technical test that you'll be doing? So let's have a bit of a dive into that bit now. So when we think about content of the technical test, you've got to think about the aim, right? Why is the employer giving you a technical test? Well, they're giving it to you so they have proof that you could come in and you can do the role. So what two things are they looking for here? They're looking for general coding ability, and then they're looking that you would be able to work with their data type. So the technical tests that I've been doing as part of my job hunting process, they kind of come in two parts. So part one is prove your syntax, prove that you know the language that you're going to be working with. And then secondly, prove that you could work with their data type. So you can get basic Python syntax questions. If you go onto Google, there's loads of resources about interview questions that you could be asked. I'll put some resources that you can have a look at there. And then, just what data are they working with? So if they're a company working with RNA-seq data, they could ask you a question on, if we gave you a table which had data X in it, how would you go about analysing that? Or if it was a human genetics company, they might ask you some questions about the kind of statistical approaches behind the human genetics calculations to prove that you'd be able to come in and work with that data. So two kind of tips for preparing for your technical test: revise your basic syntax, whether it's Python, R, whatever language you're going to be working in. Revise your basic syntax. Make sure you've been doing lots of coding practice, and have a look at those practice tests, practice questions you can get online to make sure that everything's really fresh in your head. And then tip number 2, make sure you understand what data the job is going to be working with. Is that genomic data? Is it transcriptomic data? Is it image data? And then think about what that data type actually looks like. Because you're not going to be analysing a molecule of RNA, you'll be analysing, gene expression counts. So think about what the data type actually would look like, and then have a look online about different types of analysis approaches towards that data type to show that you're familiar, or at least have some understanding of where you'd begin to start analysing that data type. Oh, my cat, hello! Technical test tips. And tip number 3, which is the most important tip, to be honest, whenever you're talking through technical things, whether they're like your test or whatever, make sure at every single point you talk through your rationale of what you're thinking. So if you get stumped by a question and you don't know the answer, make sure that you talk through the panel what your brain is thinking. So you might not know out of the multiple choice which one is the correct answer, but you could voice that and say, hey, I don't understand, I don't know for certain which one is correct, but I can tell you what I do know. And then start walking them through the things that you know. Do you know a certain line, what that would do? Can you eliminate one of the multiple choices? If you're working with gene expression data, you might not know the certain algorithm, but you could say, in another scenario, I've done this, maybe it's applicable to this. So basically just make sure that you communicate what your brain is thinking in regards to the technical test. So even if you don't get something 100% right, you can still show that you are a problem solver, and problem solving is the key to being a fantastic bioinformatician or computational biologist, whatever you want to call this job title. So that's it for today's video. I hope this was helpful. If you've enjoyed today's content, give this video a like and subscribe. And as always, put in the comment section anything else you'd love to hear from me in terms of finding a job in this field. So thanks for listening. Until the next time, catch you all later.